So just how far will cancel culture go in the push to erase or rewrite American history? We're watching this play out again tonight in Washington. Let's start right there with Republican Senator from Utah, Mike Lee. Senator, welcome back.
Thank you.
All right, this is not an uncommon scene. Things have died down a little bit here in D.C., but it's a bit of deja vu again tonight as we see graffiti on St. John's Church, attempts to take down the Andrew Jackson statue, and not only that, but an attempt to set up an autonomous zone here in Washington. What's your impression of what you're seeing tonight?
It's perfectly unacceptable in every way, shape, and form. Look, Shannon, these people have a grievance, and that's understandable. But if these statues, if these monuments don't belong to them, which to my knowledge, they don't in any case, then they don't have the right to take them down. Anyone who owns a statue or a monument has the authority to take it down. And if it belongs to a government, then the decision needs to be made by those government officials. In a representative system like ours, if somebody doesn't take down a statue you want them to take down from public property, you can vote them out. One thing you can't do is surround the monument with a lawless, violent mob and pole vault over it, run under it, and then tear the thing down and deface it. That's lawlessness, and it leads to more lawlessness and more violence. That's exactly what we don't need in this country.
The president tweeting a short time ago, he says numerous people arrested in D.C. for the disgraceful vandalism in Lafayette Park of the magnificent statue of Andrew Jackson, in addition to exterior defacing of St. John's Church across the street. And again, to remind people, that was the one that was set fire a couple of weeks ago. 10 years in prison under the Veterans Memorial Preservation Act. Beware. Do you think there will be a successful effort to prosecute those who are responsible for what we're seeing, and not only here in D.C., but in a number of cities across the country?
I would certainly hope that anytime you have people willfully acting in a lawless fashion in order to destroy public property, especially public property that has some historical significance, particularly in our nation's capital, that ought to be concerning to all Americans, and it ought to be concerning to those charged with enforcing our laws. That said, my job is to write the laws, not enforce them. That's somebody else's decision. But it is a dangerous thing to allow things like this to go unnoticed and completely unpunished.
Okay, the Washington Post, under the headline, a piece that appeared last week, "Destroying Confederate Monuments Isn't Erasing History, It's Learning From It," says these symbols serve one primary purpose: to honor figures of the past who upheld an undemocratic vision of America. They were created by white supremacists, and they function as a balm for white supremacists who long to return to a period when Americans regarded black people as property. So where do we go with the movement to take down a lot of these memorials and reminders? I mean, the latest example now doesn't have to do with the Civil War, but former President Teddy Roosevelt and a statue in New York that will be removed because it's viewed as offensive because of the two men that are there with him that are viewed as potentially, he's the superior one, the message it may send. Where do we draw the right line with removing things that are hurtful and offensive and maintaining historical integrity of other things that could be judged otherwise?
I'm not sure there's a single algorithmic formula that can help us ascertain in any and every circumstance where a name or a statue needs to go. I know only that it's got to be made by the appropriate person or group of people. If it's government owned, then it needs to be the people who have been elected and duly sworn and chosen to run that government entity. It can't be done on an ad hoc basis by some group wanting to set up a sort of sovereign autonomous zone. That doesn't work. We also know, Shannon, that when we take our history and we try to neglect key parts of it, it is the prerogative of the victor to write history. But as I warned in a book I wrote a few years ago called Written Out of History, if you do too much of that, you can end up doing real harm to your system of government, because your system of government is, as is the case here in the United States, it's informed by our past. And there are some historical figures that, while not perfect, we can learn from. And we don't want to go changing everything all at once.
Can you quickly, before we have to go, tell us about what you're working on with charities with regard to COVID? They've been hit hard. They've been extending themselves, trying to serve in a really tough time. You're trying to work on something on Capitol Hill to help them out.
Yeah, I'm part of a bipartisan group of senators that are trying to increase the amount of charitable contribution deduction that poor and middle class Americans can gain access to. In other words, currently those who benefit the most from the charitable contribution deduction are those who itemize their deductions and make enough money to do so. We want to make it available above the line. In other words, for those who make less than what would ordinarily qualify them for itemized deductions. We're trying to get that put in place for tax years 2019 and 2020 because our charitable institutions have been cash starved during the COVID-19 global pandemic, and they've also seen the demand for their services go way up, even at the same time when the virus has itself made it harder for them to do everything they've got to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, it'll benefit Americans who've been so kind and so generous giving to try to help others, and those charities that have been very extended as well. Senator Lee, thanks for stopping in tonight.
Thank you, Shanna.